Continuation of The Wind in the Willows, Chapter 8. Toad's Adventure. The sun streaming into the hollow on the early summer morning woke Toad. At first he looked around for the stone walls and the little barred window of his cell, and then he remembered where he was and how he got there. Shaking the dry leaves out of his hair, he crept out of the hollow and marched off. Confident and hopeful, though a little hungry, he crossed several fields until he came to a road. Perhaps he'd meet someone who could tell him which way to go. Soon the road began to run alongside a canal. At a bend, Toad came upon a horse plodding along. A rope was attached to his collar, and its other end was attached to a barge slowly making its way down the middle of the canal. Steering the barge at the tiller was a big, fat woman wearing a linen sun bonnet. "A nice morning, ma'am," called the woman, as she spotted Toad on the shore. "I'm in luck," thought Toad. Then he twisted his face into a sad, gloomy expression as he called back, "It probably is a nice morning, ma'am, but not for a washerwoman who's in trouble like I am. My married daughter sent for me. An emergency, the message said. Well, if you're a mother too, you can understand that I had to go at once, even though it meant leaving my other children home alone. As if that wasn't bad enough. I've lost my money and my way too." "Where does your married daughter live?" "Near Riverbank, close to a fine house they call Toad Hall. Do you know it?" "Know it? Why, it's only a few miles ahead." "I'm going that way myself, and I'd be glad to give you a lift on my barge." Toad was overjoyed. "I always come out on top," he thought, as the woman steered the barge to shore, and he hopped on board. "So you're a washerwoman," said the barge woman politely. "I hear it's a very good business." "Finest business in the country," boasted Toad. "I have only wealthy customers who appreciate my washing and ironing talents." "You sound very fond of washing." "Oh, I love it. I'm at my happiest when both my arms are deep in soapy water." "Then it's lucky for both of us that we met," said the woman, rubbing her chin thoughtfully. Toad suddenly became nervous. "What do you mean?" he asked. "Well, I like washing too. But I've got this barge to run since my husband's too lazy to do it. I simply can't think of anything but the wash that's piling up in the cabin. Say, since you say you're happiest when your arms are in soapy water, you can help me out and be happy at the same time. It'll be more fun for you than just sitting here looking at the shore." Toad was now thoroughly frightened. "Let me steer," he said. "Then you can do your own washing. I wouldn't want to spoil your things by not doing them the way you like." "Let you steer? It takes practice to steer a barge properly. Besides, it's dull work, and I want you to be happy after all your family troubles." Toad was cornered. He thought of jumping off the barge, but he was too far from the bank. "I guess if I'm desperate enough, I can wash. Probably any fool can do it." So he went into the cabin for the tub and soap and began to wash, or what he thought washing was. After a long half-hour, he was getting angrier and angrier. Nothing he did could get the clothes clean. Not rubbing, not slapping, not punching. Nothing. By now, his back was aching from bending over the tub, and his paws were getting as crinkly and shriveled up from being in the water all that time. As he lost the soap for the 50th time, he began muttering under his breath words that neither a washerwoman nor a Toad should ever mutter. A burst of laughter from the barge woman made him straighten up. "I've been watching you all this time," she cackled, "and it's just as I thought. You're a fake. You've never washed a thing in your entire life." Toad's anger finally boiled over, and he shrieked, "How dare you talk to your superior like that? I'll have you know I'm the highly respected, distinguished Mr. Toad, and I will not be laughed at by a common barge woman like you." "Well, no horrid, crawly Toad is going to stay on my nice clean barge," she cried, as she let go of the tiller and grabbed Toad by one front leg and one hind leg. The next moment Toad found himself flying through the air. He landed in the water with a loud splash, and then rose to the surface, choking for air. He looked back and saw the woman laughing. "I'll get even with you," he vowed. "I don't know how, but I will." The barge woman was still laughing and shouting as Toad got to the shore. But Toad didn't waste his time or words. He wanted real revenge, and he saw his chance, for it just up ahead. It was the horse. He quickly overtook the slow, plodding horse and untied the tow rope that attached it to the barge, and then he jumped on the animal's back, gave it a vigorous kick in the sides, and galloped off. He left the path and headed for open country, looking back only once. The barge had run aground on the other side of the canal, and the woman was waving her arms and shouting wildly for him to stop. But Toad only laughed as he urged the horse on for greater speed. After traveling several miles, Toad reached an open field with a few scattered trees. Under one tree stood a shabby gypsy wagon. Beside it sat a man smoking a pipe and stirring an iron pot hung over a fire. Gurgling sounds from the pot traveled to Toad's ears, and warm, rich smells flowed into his nostrils, reminding him how hungry he was. The man lifted his eyes from the pot and stared at the woman on horseback. "Care to sell that horse of yours?" he asked. For the moment, Toad was stunned. Then he realized that the horse could bring him two things he wanted and needed desperately, money and food. But he'd have to be shrewd. "What?" he cried, pretending to be shocked and insulted. "Me sell this beautiful young horse of mine? No, it's out of the question. I need him to carry my washing to my customers, and besides, I'm too fond of him. All the same, how much would you offer if I were interested in selling him?" "4 shillings. "I'm afraid not, my man. 4 shillings is an insult for this beautiful young horse." "Well, I can make it 5, but that's all the animal's worth. 5's my last offer." Toad thought long and hard. He was hungry and penniless and still far from home. Even now the police might be searching for him. He reasoned to himself, "While 5 shillings isn't very much for a horse, it didn't cost me anything to get him, so whatever I make is clear profit." Then he spoke firmly to the gypsy. "I tell you what I'll do, and this is my last word. You give me 6 shillings and as much food as I can possibly eat at one meal from that iron pot of yours. If that's not agreeable, I'll be on my way." The gypsy grumbled, but finally pulled a dirty cloth bag from his pocket and counted out 6 shillings into Toad's paw. And then he climbed into his wagon and came back out with a large plate and a fork and a spoon. Tilting the iron pot, he dished out the most beautiful stew Toad had ever seen or smelled or tasted. Toad actually cried with joy as he ate, emptying his plate 4 times and asking for more each time. When his stomach could hold no more food, Toad said goodbye to the gypsy and to the horse. After the gypsy gave him directions to Riverbank, he set off. "How clever I've been to fool everyone. Nothing can go wrong now," he told himself. "The sun is shining, my wet clothes are dry, and I have money in my pocket. I'm near my home and my friends and safety, and best of all, my stomach is nice and stuffed with a hot, nourishing meal." Yes, Toad felt big and strong and self-confident, and he made up a song as he sang at the top of his voice as he tramped along. "The world has held great heroes, as history books have showed, but never a name will have the fame of the clever Mr. Toad." On and on he went, making up new verses, all boasting about himself, all adding to his conceit and pride. After many miles on the country lane, Toad reached a main road. A cloud of dust in the distance was coming towards him, and with the dust came a familiar pop-pop that filled Toad with joy. A motor car! How wonderful, thought Toad. I'll have to make up a story that will convince them to give me a lift, and who knows? Maybe I'll even drive up to Toad Hall. That would make Badger sit up and take notice. So Toad stepped out into the middle of the road and waved at the approaching car. When it was close enough for him to see it clearly, he began to shake violently, and then he doubled up and collapsed right where he was standing, for he recognized the car as the very same one he had stolen from the inn. "It's all over," Toad cried miserably. "Prison again, chains again. What a fool I've been! Why did I ever strut across the country during the day, singing such conceited songs? I should have hidden in the woods and traveled only at night." The motor car drew closer, then stopped, and two gentlemen got out and walked towards the crumpled, miserable creature lying on the road. "Oh dear, how sad," said one of the men. "It looks like a washerwoman who has fainted." "Let's lift her into the car and take her to the nearest village," said the other. So they gently placed Toad in the back seat and propped him up with cushions. "They didn't recognize me," thought Toad gleefully, as they started up again, and he opened one eye, and then the other. "Look," said one man, "she looks better already. Must be the fresh air." "Yes, I'm a bit better," said Toad weakly, "but I was thinking that perhaps if I sat in the front seat beside the driver, I could get more air in my face. Then I am sure I'd be perfectly fine again." "That's a sensible idea," said one man, and they helped Toad into the front seat while the passenger went into the back. And Toad was now full of confidence again, and the old yearning to be behind the wheel overpowered him once more. "Please, sir," he said to the driver beside him, "I'd like to drive the car for a little while. I've been watching you, and it looks so easy. And I'd be able to tell my friends that once I drove a motor car." And the driver hesitated, but his friend exclaimed, "I like her spirit. Let her have a try. She can't do any harm, and you'll be beside her to look after her." So the driver got out and came around to the passenger seat, while Toad slid over and eagerly grabbed the steering wheel. He pretended to listen respectfully to the instructions the man was giving him, and then he slowly and carefully started to drive. At first the men clapped their hands at the little washerwoman's skill, and then Toad began to speed up, faster and faster and faster, and he went ignoring the man's warning shouts. The driver tried to lean over and grab the wheel. "Stop, washerwoman," he cried, but Toad elbowed him out of the way and speeded up even more. "Washerwoman, indeed!" shouted Toad. "Why, I'm Toad, the motor car thief, the escaped prisoner. Sit back and learn what driving really is, in the hands of the famous, skillful, fearless Toad." With a cry of horror, the enraged men jumped up and flung themselves on Toad, forgetting for the moment that they were in a speeding car. Toad turned to avoid them and sent the car crashing off the road and into the thick mud of a pond. And Toad found himself flying through the air, feeling for a moment like a graceful bird, until he landed on some soft grass in a meadow. He picked himself up and began running away. He glanced back quickly and saw the car sinking. The two men were floundering in the water with their long coats pulling them down. Toad continued to run as hard as he could through the hedges, over ditches, across fields, until he was sure he was out of sight and not being followed, and then he sat down to rest and catch his breath. As his confidence returned, he began to giggle. "Ha ha ha! As usual, Toad has come out on top. I got them to give me a ride and put me in the front seat and to let me drive, and I was the one who escaped from the pond unhurt, while those foolish men got stuck in the mud. What a clever Toad I am! What a great, great Toad!" And just then a slight noise in the distance behind him made him turn his head. "Oh no! Oh misery! Oh horror!" he cried. "The police are coming after me!" Toad sprang to his feet and began to run. "Oh my!" he panted. "What an idiot I am! What a conceited, mindless idiot!" The men were gaining on him. In his panic, Toad began running blindly and wildly. When he turned to look back, his feet suddenly left the ground, and he found himself in the air for a brief second, and then splash! He was dropping into deep, rushing water, into a river that was carrying him along in its swiftly flowing current. Toad tried to grab onto the reeds that grew along the bank, but the river kept pulling him away. "Oh my!" he gasped. "If I ever steal—" But the river pulled him under before he could make another empty promise. He popped up to the surface, breathless and weak. The current was now pushing him towards a big dark hole just above the water level in the bank. He reached up with a grasp and grabbed on to the edge, and then slowly and painfully pulled himself up until his elbows were resting there. He dropped his head onto his hands and held on, puffing and panting, until his breath returned. Suddenly from inside that dark hole came two shiny circles. As they came closer, a face appeared around them, a small brown face with whiskers and neat ears and silky hair. It was a familiar face. It was Rat. Chapter 9. No Home to Come Home To. Rat's little brown paw grabbed Toad by the back of his neck and hauled him up out of the water and over the edge of the hole on to his front hall. Mud, weeds, and water dripped off Toad as he cried, "Oh, Ratty, I've been through such suffering, such escapes, such disguises. But I bore all those trials so nobly. I proved to everyone just how smart a toad I really am. Just wait till I tell you of my thrilling adventures and just how clever I—" Rat didn't let him continue. "Toad," he said firmly, "go upstairs at once, and take off that rag that makes you look like a washerwoman, and then clean yourself thoroughly and put on some of my clothes. You may come back down when you look like a gentleman, if that's possible." Toad didn't like being ordered around, and he was about to argue back, but he saw himself in the mirror and changed his mind. By the time he came back down, cleaned and dressed properly, his pride and conceit had returned. He told Rat all that he had done, boasting of his cleverness and cunning rather than admitting his foolishness and guilt. He even made it sound like an exciting adventure. And when Toad was finally talked out, Rat sighed and said, "Now, Toady, I know you've been through a lot of pain already, but don't you see what a fool you've been making of yourself? Handcuffed, imprisoned, chased, starved, terrified, insulted, jeered at, and even flung into the water by a woman? That's not an adventure, and it's all because you stole a motor car which you can easily afford to buy yourself. You're right, Ratty. I've been conceited and foolish, but from now on I'm going to be good. Not bring any more shame on my friends or myself. I'll go down to Toad Hall now, get into my own clothes, and pick up my life again. I think I've had enough adventures to last me the rest of my life." "Go down to Toad Hall?" cried Rat. "You mean you haven't heard?" "Heard what?" gasped Toad, turning pale. "The stoats and weasels and ferrets from the Wild Wood have captured Toad Hall." Tears filled Toad's eyes and splashed onto the table. "Go on, Ratty. Tell me all about it," he sobbed. "I can bear it." "Well, when you got into all that trouble and you were thrown into jail, Mole and Badger and I stuck up for you. We believed you had been unfairly treated and would somehow come back to us. But all the animals in the Wild Wood said you deserved everything you got, and you'd never come back again." "Those beasts!" cried Toad. "Anyhow, Mole, Badger, and I decided to move into Toad Hall, to guard it and keep it clean and ready for you when you returned. Now there's the painful and tragic part of my story. One dark, stormy night, a gang of bloodthirsty weasels, ferrets, and stoats broke down the doors and rushed at Mole and Badger from all sides. Our faithful friends tried to put up a fight, but they were only 2 against hundreds. They were badly beaten with sticks, and thrown out into the storm. "Oh, my poor friends," sobbed Toad. Then those wild woodsers took over Toad Hall, and have been living there ever since, sleeping away half the day, eating your food, drinking your fine wine, and making a terrible mess, and boasting to everyone, "We're here for good." "Well, we'll see about that," exclaimed Toad, getting up and reaching for a stick. "That won't do any good, Toady. You'll only get into more trouble," warned Rat. But Toad was off, marching quickly down the road, fuming and muttering in anger. No sooner was he at the front gate of Toad Hall than a long yellow ferret popped out from behind a post and pointed a gun at him. "Who comes here?" demanded the ferret. "How dare you talk to me like that? Come out at once, or I'll—" The ferret raised his gun to his shoulder and sent a bullet whistling over Toad's head. Then he burst out laughing at Toad as he scampered off down the road as fast as his legs could carry him. "I warned you," said the Rat when Toad had returned. "I warned you," said Rat when Toad had returned. "They've got armed guards posted everywhere. You simply must wait." But Toad wasn't much good at waiting. And that afternoon he took out Rat's boat and set off up the river towards Toad Hall. Just as he was passing under the bridge at the entrance to the creek, crash! A huge rock dropped from above and smashed through the bottom of the boat, and the little boat quickly filled with water and sank. "It'll be your head next time, Toady," called two stoats, who were leaning over the bridge and laughing as Toad struggled to shore and headed back to Rat's home. "I told you not to go," said Rat angrily, "and this time you've lost my boat and ruined my nice suit. Really, Toad, this is hardly the way to keep friends." "You're absolutely right, Ratty. I'm truly sorry. I've been headstrong and willful. From now on, I won't do anything without your advice and approval, I promise." "I hope you mean that. But we can't do anything until we see Mole and Badger." "Yes, of course. What's become of them?" "Those two devoted friends have been camping out in all kinds of weather, watching over your house and planning how to get it back for you. You don't deserve such true and loyal friends." "I am an ungrateful beast, I know," sobbed Toad. "Let me go out and find them and share their hard life. After dinner, of course." Rat couldn't refuse to serve Toad a good dinner, since his friend had been living on prison food for such a long time. Just as they were finishing their meal, Badger and Mole came in. Both looked shabby and unwashed, covered with mud and hay. Badger came up to Toad, and they shook hands. "Welcome home, Toad. Sorry this has to be such a sad homecoming." Then he sat down at the table and served himself some food. Toad was upset that Badger could think of food at a time like this, but Mole's greeting lifted his spirits. "How wonderful to have you back again!" cried Mole, dancing around him. "How ever did you manage to escape, you clever Toad?" "I'm not really clever. I just broke out of the strongest prison in all of England, captured a railway train, escaped on it, and disguised myself and traveled across the country, fooling everybody I could. That's all there was to it." "That sounds exciting. Suppose you tell me everything while I eat," said Mole. "I think it's more important for us to learn what's happening at Toad Hall," interrupted Rat. "Toad's stories can wait." "Everything's as bad as ever," said Mole glumly. "Guards are still posted everywhere. Guns are continually poked at us. Stones are thrown at us, and the animals are always laughing at us." "Well, I think Toad ought to," Rat began. "No, he oughtn't," snapped Mole. "Well, I won't do it, whatever it is," yelled Toad. By now Toad, Mole, and Rat were shouting together, and the noise was deafening. Suddenly a soft, firm voice. "Be quiet, all of you." Badger had finished his meal and was looking at them sternly. All three quieted down. He got up from his chair and stood before the fireplace, pointing his finger at Toad. He said, You are a troublesome little animal, and you should be ashamed of yourself. What do you think of your father, who was my old friend? What do you think he would have said if he had known what you've done?" Toad threw himself down on the sofa, rolled his legs over his face, and began to sob. "Stop crying," said Badger gently. "We're going to forget the past and make a new beginning. Now, what Mole says is true. The stoats guarding Toad Hall are the best sentinels in the world. We could never attack the place. But there are ways of getting it back besides taking it by storm, and I'm going to share that secret with you." Toad sat up and dried his eyes. Secrets were exciting things for him because he could never keep one and because he got a special thrill out of telling a secret he had promised not to tell. Badger continued, "There is an underground passage that leads from the river bank right near here and comes up in the middle of Toad Hall." "That's nonsense," snapped Toad. "I know every inch of that place, and there's nothing of the sort underground. Take my word." "My young friend," insisted Badger, "your father was a fine man who told me many more things than he would ever dream of telling you. This passage had been made hundreds of years before he ever came to live at Toad Hall. When he discovered it, he cleaned it out and repaired it just in case danger forced him or his family to use it. And he told me specifically, 'Don't let my son know about it. He's a good boy, but he loves to talk. If he's ever in trouble and needs to use it, you can tell him about it.' But not before." Toad frowned at first, and then, like the good fellow he really was at heart, he quickly brightened. "Perhaps my father was right. I am a bit of a talker, especially when my friends are gathered round me. But do go on, Badger. How will this passage help us?" "I found out that there's going to be a big party tomorrow night at Toad Hall to celebrate the Chief Weasel's birthday. Everyone will be in the banquet hall eating and drinking. They won't suspect anything, so they won't be armed. Besides, they trust their guards to protect them." "But how will we get past the guards?" asked Rat. "That's where the passage comes in. It comes up right under the butler's pantry next to the banquet hall," explained Badger. "We'll creep quietly into the pantry and rush them," cried Mole. "What a surprise!" "And whack 'em," shouted Toad, running and jumping around the room. "Our plan is settled then," said Badger. "Now you must all go to bed. We'll make the final arrangements in the morning." Toad obeyed, though he thought he was much too excited to sleep. Still, once his head hit the pillow, his dreams carried him into secret passages and to a triumphant return to Toad Hall. It was late when Toad awoke the next morning. The other animals had already finished their breakfast, and Badger was sitting in an armchair reading the paper, and Rat was preparing piles of weapons for that evening's attack. Just then Mole came tumbling into the room, proudly announcing, "I just returned from having fun teasing those stoats guarding Toad Hall. I put on that old washerwoman dress Toad came home in yesterday, and it has been washed, of course, along with the apron and bonnet and shawl, and off I went. 'Good morning,' says I to the guard, bold as could be, but very respectful. 'Want any washing done today?' 'Go away, washerwoman,' they called back. 'We don't wash, not ever. Now run away.' 'Well,' says I, 'run away, you say? It won't be me that'll be running away very soon.' And Badger put down his paper to listen to Mole's story. 'Well, the sergeant tells 'em never mind her. She doesn't know what she's saying.' 'Oh, don't I?' says I. 'Well, let me tell you this. My daughter washes for Mr. Badger, and she told me that over 100 bloodthirsty badgers armed with rifles are going to attack Toad Hall tonight through the stables, and 6 boatloads of rats with pistols and cutlasses will come up the river and land in the garden, and then a select body of toads who call themselves Death or Glory toads will storm the French doors screaming for vengeance. I don't suppose there'll be much left of you to wash for by the time they're done with you." Then I ran away, but I hid myself behind the hedge to see what was happening. Those stoats were as nervous as could be, running all around, falling over each other, and giving orders that no one paid attention to. Then I heard the sergeant say, "That's just like the weasels. They're going to be enjoying their party while we have to stand guard and be cut to pieces by bloodthirsty badgers." "Oh, Mole, you imbecile!" cried Toad. "You warned them. Now you've spoiled everything." "Mole," said Badger quietly, "you have more sense in your little finger than some animals have in their whole fat little bodies." And he turned to give Toad a nasty look, and then he continued, "Mole, you have been quite clever. I'm proud of you." Toad was wild with jealousy, especially because he couldn't figure out what Mole had done that was so clever. But before he could show a temper of protest, Rat announced lunch, and Toad would never miss a meal. Once they were finished, Badger took a nap to rest up for the attack that evening, and Rat continued adding to his pile of weapons. Mole led Toad out into the garden and made him recount all his adventures, which Toad was only too eager to do, especially since Mole was a wonderful listener, and no one would be around to check the truthfulness of his stories or criticize them. And we will continue this story next Wednesday, and thanks for listening to Miss Retro Reads.